Imagine an elderly man with a silver beard, his hands trembling, bound in shackles, standing in a cold, unforgiving courtroom, all for a sleeping bag. Why? Who is this man? Once faced hundreds of bombs, who saved countless lives, yet is now branded a criminal in the very country he vowed to protect. The story of Samuel Sam Tucker, explosive ordnance disposal. Sergeant, we'll leave you breathless, from the bitter winter nights to the moment the entire courtroom rose in reverence. This is a journey of unsung courage, of wounds long forgotten, and of a secret that could change everything. Do you dare step into this story to uncover the truth that will stir your soul? Subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our great, compelling stories. January's wind swept across the deserted station platform with a dry howl, a warning to fragile souls. Snowflakes darted through the gaps in the ramshackle hut that Sam Tucker called home. They struck the rotting wood frame, shattering into 1,000 icy crystals. At 73, his gaunt body grew weary under the biting cold. His right hip, the site where a U.S. fragment lodged 3 decades ago, throbbed in time with each breath, like a frozen blade embedded in the stillness of winter. Sam huddled in threadbare layers of patched clothing, each coat a fragile barrier against the blizzard. They said a fierce gust could tear away his makeshift tarp, his only shield from the snow, and every storm brought that rasping roar of fabric ripping apart. He closed his eyes, striving to imagine himself back in a mountain troop tent in Afghanistan, where desert roses once ignited under summer's sun, then died beneath the frost of night. It was not the cold wind, but the searing memories that kept Sam alert in the dark. He recalled the scorching desert sun, temperatures beyond endurance, the bone-chilling cold atop snowy peaks, the trembling hands that disarmed more than 300 explosive devices, each a gamble with death. The faces of fallen comrades, their eyes fixed on him with unwavering trust, haunted him like candles that would not go out. 28 years in uniform had taught Sam to survive winters far harsher than this. But now he was merely a homeless shadow, living in a hut built from discarded pallets. Damp earth lay beneath his feet. Jagged stones made every step a burden. The cold seeped into his joints until he could not tell flesh from wind from pain, each breath a struggle between life and death. The weather report had just warned of temperatures plummeting to -15 Celsius by midnight. People had already died in such cold. 4 homeless veterans lost in this same city winter, found on park benches or in crumbling alcoves, clinging to fading warmth. The news filled Sam with dread and helplessness. He remembered long patrols where every second was perilous, yet his heart had brimmed with purpose. He had a mission. He had comrades. He had hope. Now, only memories and solitude remained. The old station stood silent. Peeling paint made its sign barely legible. Across the tracks, behind a rusted fence, lay a 1970s military supply depot, once a playground of hide-and-seek for children. Rumor had it the warehouse held sleeping bags, coats, tents. Then it was abandoned in bureaucratic chaos, forgotten or deliberately ignored. Sam rose, each step slow and heavy over splintered wood, his gaze blurred by snow and damp. He stared at the stacked containers. Security lights were out. Only the distant city glow remained, a reminder that the world kept turning while he stood in emptiness. His eyes flickered with a fragile hope. "Just one sleeping bag," he whispered, his voice low and aching. In Afghanistan, an army sleeping bag had saved him through countless winters. When the mercury dropped, he still felt its warmth, a comforting embrace in the frozen desert. He knew there might still be unused bags in that depot, and if he could get one, he need never fear becoming an icicle again. Sam inhaled deeply, fighting the tremor through his bones. He remembered scaling high fences, fingers gripping chain link, each hold coated in sweat and scars. Though fear lingered, survival drove him forward. Under that tattered coat beat the fiery heart of a young warrior, unyielding to brutal cold. He shrugged and bent over the fence gap, closing his eyes to plan each move. The depot corner was rarely guarded. On nights this frigid, no one patrolled. Sam crept under a collapsed section of fence. His hand brushed rough concrete. His heart pounded as it had when disarming bombs. Each motion was light yet sure, like a soldier accustomed to shell fire. In the open space between containers, Sam looked up at the faintly starry sky. The wind still whistled through cracks, but it could not extinguish his resolve. He spotted olive green sleeping bags neatly stacked on a pallet, alongside empty ammo crates. His eyes lit up. Joy warmed him against the cold. Without a sound, Sam unlatched the pallet's lock and gently pulled out a sleeping bag. A soft warmth rippled through his chest. For the first time in many nights, he felt hope. This thick bag would be his final shield against the frost. Proof that he, a veteran, was never truly alone in this battle. He carefully rolled the bag, slung it over his shoulder, and glanced back at the depot. Under the pale moonlight, Sam Tucker looked like a brave ghost, treading steadily toward his hut. The wind might tear at his tarp, the cold might batter his flesh, but within his heart burned the eternal flame of a warrior. And with that army sleeping bag, he knew he would conquer this winter night, just as he had every storm in desert and mountain before. A fierce wind howled in from the north. It swept across the snow-blanketed rails, rocking the makeshift hut that Sam Tucker called home under the storm's assault. The bone-cutting cold left him no room for hesitation. His right hip, the old shrapnel wound from 30 years ago, now felt like a live detonator, throbbing in agony with every beat. Sam shuddered. The ancient combat knife at his belt vibrated with each breath, yet he knew that between life and death there was no mercy. Silently, he rose to his feet, careful that the whistle of the wind would not betray him. Ahead, the shadow of the military supply depot stretched across the tracks. Homeless youths had long since cut a hole in the fence, leaving a jagged path of metal shards and twisted wire. Sam moved toward it. His hand trembled yet was resolute as he retrieved his small flashlight, wire cutters, and combat knife, tools essential for surmounting this final barrier. Near the fence, Sam crouched to find the cut left by those young trespassers. In that moment, he was back in smoke-choked nights diffusing mines. Each wire snipped was a gamble with death. Tonight, his opponent was not a bomb, but the merciless cold paired with pitch-black darkness. He set the flashlight on the snow, and with a painful grunt, he clamped the cutters around the rusty mesh. The slice was wide enough for his frail frame to slip through, yet small enough to avoid the street lamp's glare. His footprints marked the fresh snow, faint reminders of a life on the move. Through the opening, he paused and flicked on his flashlight, sweeping its beam across the yard. The service door of the depot lay ahead, its lock already mangled, either by professionals or curious teens. Sam set aside his cutters, used his knife and a bent lockpick to pry open the shackle. In the thick darkness, his fingers worked each tiny turn with absolute focus. Minutes passed, and with a soft click, the lock surrendered, a silent anthem of victory. Inside the gate, the warehouse fell deathly silent. The wind's howl was gone, replaced by the stale scent of long undisturbed dust. Sam inhaled sharply to steady himself. His flashlight revealed empty metal racks and filing cabinets blanketed in grime. Every footstep echoed on the icy concrete. Faded, important, and authorized personnel only signs clung to the walls, mocking humanity's forgetfulness. He crept down the aisle between shelves, his thin shoulders quivering as he shone light into every corner. In a hidden nook, he found a stack of old military containers, each weathered, paint peeling, corners worn. Sam approached and felt along the latch and metal fittings. Arthritic pain shot through his fingers as he twisted the catch, using his knife to pry it open. The container door groaned ajar, exhaling the stale odor of untouched canvas. His flashlight beam fell upon neatly stacked olive-drab sleeping bags. A rare warmth flooded his heart. Memories of camp nights in the Afghan desert surged back, the sand scouring his face, yet inside that bag he'd felt his comrade's presence, an embrace that gave him strength to defuse that final bomb. Sam's hand trembled as he touched the rough, sturdy fabric. He pulled one bag free. His old heart thundered. He pressed his lips together to stifle the mixture of joy and fear. But peace shattered in an instant. Two blinding beams swept across him, followed by urgent shouts. "Police! Don't move!" Sam froze as two young uniformed officers emerged, weapons at the ready. His hand shook. The sleeping bag fell, rolling across the concrete before coming to rest. He forced out, I only wanted a sleeping bag so I wouldn't freeze to death." But a harsh command cut him off. "Get down on your knees. Now." He knelt, pain flaring in his hip, teeth clenched. The first officer stepped forward, producing handcuffs. "What's your name?" His voice was hoarse, laced with contempt. "Sergeant Samuel Tucker, EOD, retired," Sam whispered. The officers exchanged mocking smiles. "All right, Sergeant Tucker. You're under arrest for trespassing and stealing military property." As they cuffed him, they confiscated the sleeping bag and his tools. Led through the thin snow toward the patrol car, Sam glanced back at the depot. The patrol lights flickered across the aged containers, like clouds startled before dawn. The very bag he'd risked everything for now lay secure in their trunk, while he, a trembling old man branded a criminal, harbored one bitter thought. "I just didn't want to die in the cold." But that whisper, in -15-degree wind, dissolved into the frozen night. No one heard it, and no one cared. The clamor of the district court the next morning struck Sam Tucker as strangely surreal. It felt as though he'd wandered into a parade of justice. The brisk footsteps echoed through the hall. Some rushed by, wheeling briefcases. Others whispered to loved ones, all headed toward one goal: the trial. Sam sat alone in the defendant's area. His orange jumpsuit hung loosely over his gaunt frame. 3 nights in custody had etched deep weariness into the hollows of his eyes, yet his posture remained as erect as a soldier's discipline. Only once that morning did Sam meet his court-appointed attorney, a young woman with keen eyes and nimble fingers flipping through his file. She sat across from him. After a quick glance at the documents, she said, "Breaking into a military facility is a very serious felony, Mr. Tucker. If you plead guilty, the court may sentence you to community service with probation. Given your age, that's something to consider." Her tone was firm, but her gaze already drifted toward the next case. Sam was silent for a moment. His eyes rested on the defendant placard before him. He drew a deep breath. He fought to steady the pain in his right hip, the shrapnel wound he'd carried for 30 years. Then he spoke in a warm, steady voice. "I did not steal. That sleeping bag belongs to the army. I once owned the exact same model in Afghanistan. The attorney frowned and sighed wearily. Your military service does not grant you immunity, and the evidence against you is clear. I advise you to plead guilty. As the court clerk called Samuel Tucker, Sam rose, his step light yet resolute, as though he still answered to military orders. Before Judge Raymond Carter, an austere man with perpetually furrowed brows, Sam clasped his hands behind his back. He met the judge's gaze without flinching. "How does the defendant plead?" the judge asked, his voice ringing through the solemn courtroom. Before his attorney could interject, Sam spoke up. "Your Honor, I am innocent." His voice carried through the room. A ripple of surprise passed through the prosecution table. The prosecutor, a confident, stern-faced woman of middle age, stood to present her argument. The defendant was caught red-handed while breaking into a military supply depot and stealing government property. He has prior offenses for vagrancy and trespass. This act cannot be excused. She fixed Sam with a challenging look, daring him to produce any exceptional evidence. The judge turned to Sam. "Mr. Tucker, is there anything you wish to explain?" His gaze was sharp, underscoring the gravity of the moment. Sam inhaled deeply, easing the tension from his stiff shoulders. When his calm voice rose again, the courtroom fell silent. "I served 28 years in the United States Army, most of it defusing bombs. I faced desert heat and mountain cold. That night, when the temperature plunged to -15°C, I needed only one thing: a sleeping bag to keep from freezing outside." His words held no flourish, yet they carried the weight of a lifetime. The prosecutor offered a slight smile, her tone dismissive. "Your Honor, the defendant seems to believe his rank and service should absolve him, but the law makes no distinction between past service and present violations." She sat back down, showing no trace of sympathy. The judge pressed his lips together, the wrinkles on his forehead deepening. "His service, admirable though it may be, does not negate the charge of trespassing on government property. The law is impartial, and all citizens stand equal before it." His voice was deliberate, unwavering. "We cannot overlook burglary and theft regardless of motive. The charges will remain as filed." A murmur swept through the gallery. Eyes flicked over Sam, some pitying, others indifferent. To most, he was just another homeless old man with an unbelievable backstory. But Sam did not bow his head. He remained upright, his eyes glistening with quiet resolve. When the judge invited the public defender to argue for leniency or appeal, she rose, her voice hesitant. "Your Honor, we request consideration of mitigating factors: his dire circumstances, poor health, and lengthy service. If possible, we ask for a stay of sentence to allow medical treatment." She paused, glancing at Sam for any sign of support. The prosecutor immediately rebuffed her. "This request lacks legal foundation. Even under hardship, the law does not permit complete exemption for federal property theft. I recommend a sentence within the statutory guidelines." She sat down, her expression resolute. The judge frowned, jotting notes in his pad. He looked between counsel before declaring, "I sympathize with Mr. Tucker's personal circumstances, but we cannot ignore our duty under the law. I will deliver judgment after reviewing all records and mitigating arguments. A sentencing date will be set." He brought down his gavel. Its echo resonated through the chamber. Sam surveyed the courtroom, feeling a pang in his chest. His heart understood two worlds, one of family dinners, the other of tattered shelters. He had fought for his country. Now he must fight to be heard in a court of law. He stood proud, though sadness colored his eyes. He whispered to himself, "No matter what, the truth lives in a soldier's heart." As the session adjourned, the crowd filed out. Sam remained standing, his faded orange jumpsuit and thin frame casting a long shadow on the tile floor. Overhead lights shone down, illuminating him like a lone sentinel. In that hush, Sam Tucker, who had faced bombs and brutal cold, realized this battle was not in desert sands but within the pages of the law, where life and death were measured by a judge's decree. And he, with the steadfast heart of a veteran, would not yield to any challenge. Amid the tense trial, the judge's gavel rang out like the recess Sam Tucker had waited for all morning. He quietly moved to a corner of the defendant's area where weak light filtered through the high window. Every footstep seemed to echo with old memories, and his heart tightened. On the cold wooden bench, Sam sat down, hands clasping his knees, eyes fixed on the silvery paper folded neatly inside his orange jumpsuit pocket. The crisp fold, uncreased, hinted at a mysterious promise. His mind suddenly drifted back to 1984, Marine barracks in Beirut, where smoke still clung in the air and gunfire echoed through the wind's roar. Then, Sam was young, his heart ablaze with purpose, ready to rush into any bombardment to protect his comrades and innocent civilians. The most vivid memory, hearing a strangled cry beneath the rubble of a collapsed building. Under broken concrete lay a boy, no more than 10, his dust-covered eyes drained of hope. Without hesitation, Sam crawled over twisted rebar, gently lifting the child into his lap. He tucked him beneath his heavy vest for protection as he continued to clear explosives. Shrapnel tore through Sam's hip, blood spread across the sand, but he only had time to brush the boy's hair back, whispering, "You'll be all right, little brother." The boy clung to his finger and sobbed, and in that moment, Sam knew he was not alone, that a child's heart beat alongside his soldiers. Now, in the hush of the stone bench, that small face shone like a distant star. Sam closed his eyes, stunned by the ache of longing and regret. How many lives had he saved? How many entrusted their fate to his trembling hands? The war on bombs had scarred him, body and soul, but never once had he regretted. It was this city's ruthless cold that terrified him, because it erased everything: honor, comrades, and now his last shelter. A rustle in the hallway snapped Sam back to the present. A man in his 50s, tall and lean, bearing the bearing of a soldier despite his suit, approached and laid a precisely folded paper on the bench's edge. Then he melted back into the crowd. Sam turned, startled by the stranger's brief, covert glance, before he vanished. The paper looked glossy, yet fragile, but before Sam could pull it out, the PA announced the trial's resumption. He hesitated and stuffed the note into his chest pocket, his heart pounding with curiosity and doubt. Sam was all too familiar with empty promises. At retirement, he'd applied for VA benefits 3 times, but each application got lost in the system. He spent years on charity waiting lists, always bypassed by someone deemed more in need. His children had visited occasionally at first, then gradually cut ties. They feared his nightmares, the vacant stare and frozen nights when he jolted awake to imagined explosions and bloodied craters. Sam held no anger. They only confirmed his loneliness. And now, amid a crowded courtroom, he held an anonymous note, heavy in his tunic. When the defendant's bench creaked, Sam rose, took a steadying breath, and stepped before Judge Raymond Carter. his gaze locked on the presiding judge, but inside he was full of questions. What did "they will know who you are" mean? Would tomorrow's hearing change his fate? Or was this merely another cruel joke in a life full of them? Argument resumed. The prosecutor emphasized Sam's lack of fixed address and flight risk if released. The public defender struggled to plead mitigating factors: age, health, and decades of service, but her voice was small, tangled in the law's rigidity. The judge listened in silence, his expression stern. When he struck the gavel, "I grant release on the condition that the defendant report daily to probation. The official hearing date will be set later." A collective sigh rippled through the courtroom, but Sam was stunned. Release averted his despair and tested his resolve. In his ill-fitting orange suit, he shuffled through the courthouse doors. The dusty walls of detention faded behind him. Ahead lay a chaotic world. Snow clinging to his shoelaces, icy wind piercing his thin layers. He pressed a hand to his chest, where the note lay. He thought of his fragile hut, crushed in yesterday's blizzard, rotting pallets, tattered blankets, a few dust-covered notebooks, all buried beneath snowdrifts. He had nowhere to go. The other homeless by the station had dwindled. No one dared linger in these harsh winter nights. Sam settled on the stone steps before the courthouse and drew in a long breath. January's wind still lashed him, each gust sending shivers through his bones. In his chest pocket, the folded paper felt like a stone, too precious to discard, too weighty to open. Gently, he retrieved it and unfolded the single line written in deep black ink. 31/5/1984. Beirut, you saved a young boy. Tomorrow, the nation will know your real name and your deeds. Sam sprang to his feet, heart pounding. Those numbers and place bridged past and present like magic. Tomorrow. Just one day to steal his mind, gather his records, to face eyes that had never known him. The Beirut boy, now surely grown, was out there somewhere. Would they meet again, so he could tell that boy his own story? Weak winter sunlight lingered in the cold breeze. Sam tucked the note away and turned to go. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but a newfound faith stirred within him. No matter how stern the law, no matter that he was an aging homeless man, no matter that the VA once lost his name, tomorrow a fragment of courage would speak on his behalf. And perhaps Sam Tucker, explosive sergeant, makeshift father, the man who clawed free of every shred of hope, would no longer be forgotten. The next morning, dawn light slanted through the courtroom windows, yet it could not conceal the unusual stir within. The district court, already packed, grew even more crowded as waves of people poured in. Reporters hefting cameras, film crews hastily mounting tripods, and whispered consultations among judicial officials, all awaiting a turning point. Sam Tucker, still clad in an oversized orange jumpsuit, sat in the holding area, unaware of the spectacle unfolding just beyond the door. When the officers escorted him into the courtroom, Sam's gaze swept over the jam-packed benches of spectators and the towering camera rigs. He felt the tension taut as a drawn bowstring. Each hurried footstep echoed on the marble floor, and he caught sight of most court staff rising to their feet, eyes fixed on the main entrance. Confusion and anxiety flickered across his weathered, lined face as he was guided to the defendant's dock. Judge Raymond Carter, in his black robe and stern brows, rapped the gavel to open the session. The sound rang like a command, drawing every eye into respectful silence. I understand there are extraordinary developments in this case, the judge declared, holding the room in suspense. Before he could continue, the courtroom door swung open once more. All heads turned toward the entrance. A four-star general, resplendent in navy blues adorned with medals and insignia, entered flanked by two aides. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Soldiers, police officers, reporters, and even the defendant's family all stood at attention in a synchronized salute. Respect crackled through the tense air as cameras swung toward the general and flashes popped to capture the moment. The usher announced, "General William Hayes, United States Marine Corps," his voice both crisp and respectful. General Hayes stood with arms folded, his expression resolute. "Your Honor, I request permission to address the court regarding the defendant, Sergeant Samuel Tucker." Judge Carter, clearly impressed, nodded assent. Applause rippled softly as the general approached the lectern. General Hayes turned to Sam, as though seeking an old friend. "Sergeant Tucker, do you recall Beirut in October 1984? He asked in a deep, compelling tone that reverberated through every listener's mind. A hush fell. Even Sam's breath and heartbeat seemed amplified in his chest. Sam looked up, his eyes clouded with longing, then brightened as the memory surfaced. Nights of smoke and shellfire, and the desert chill of Iran. "The Marine barracks," he murmured, his voice low but unwavering. "The bombing." His words echoed, awakening a long-buried recollection. General Hayes nodded and stepped forward, addressing the courtroom. "In 1984, I was a 10-year-old boy, the son of a Navy nurse stationed alongside our unit. During a sudden missile attack, I was trapped under the rubble of a collapsed building. I likely would have perished if not for the courage of an EOD sergeant who risked his life to reach me. He, Sergeant Samuel Tucker, crawled through shrapnel and broken glass to shield me beneath his heavy armor." The general's voice trembled slightly as he continued. "Shrapnel tore through his hip, yet he carried me to safety. I remember the warmth beneath that steel plating, amid a world in ruins. He sacrificed himself to save a child." The courtroom fell into a breathless silence. The rustle of papers and the click of cameras sounded unnaturally loud. All eyes fixed on Sam, the ragged homeless man in orange. Yet now the glint of those medals brought a radiant halo to his lined face. General Hayes strode to the clerk's desk and laid down a thick dossier. "These are Sergeant Tucker's complete service records," he announced in a steely voice. 3 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star recommendation that was never approved, and medical reports documenting his mine injury. Each entry testifies to his courage and selfless sacrifice. He spread the pages before the court lights, the medals and citations starkly legible. The prosecutor, typically proud and sharp, faltered as she rose to rebut. "Your Honor, while we respect Sergeant Tucker's service, the charges of trespassing and theft of government property remain. Federal law makes no exception for past heroism." She paused, silenced by the general's steely gaze sweeping the courtroom. General Hayes pressed on. "That military depot ceased operations in 2015. It is no longer maintained, and its contents no longer belong to the federal government. Sergeant Tucker's act, removing one sleeping bag to save his life, was not theft, but a veteran's instinct for survival in lethal cold. I contend that this does not constitute a crime." His words thundered like a battlefield drum, each syllable weighted with justice and gratitude. The next morning, dawn light slanted through the courtroom windows, yet it could not conceal the unusual stir within. The district court, already packed, grew even more crowded as waves of people poured in. Reporters hefting cameras, film crews hastily mounting tripods, and whispered consultations among judicial officials. all awaiting a turning point. Sam Tucker, still clad in an oversized orange jumpsuit, sat in the holding area, unaware of the spectacle unfolding just beyond the door. When the officers escorted him into the courtroom, Sam's gaze swept over the jam-packed benches of spectators and the towering camera rigs. He felt the tension taut as a drawn bowstring. Each hurried footstep echoed on the marble floor, and he caught sight of most court staff rising to their feet, eyes fixed on the main entrance. Confusion and anxiety flickered across his weathered, lined face as he was guided to the defendant's dock. Judge Raymond Carter, in his black robe and stern brows, rapped the gavel to open the session. The sound rang like a command, drawing every eye into respectful silence. "I understand there are extraordinary developments in this case," the judge declared, holding the room in suspense. Before he could continue, the courtroom door swung open once more. All heads turned toward the entrance. A four-star general, resplendent in navy blues adorned with medals and insignia, entered flanked by two aides. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Soldiers, police officers, reporters, and even the defendant's family all stood at attention in a synchronized salute. Respect crackled through the tense air as cameras swung toward the general and flashes popped to capture the moment. The usher announced, "General William Hayes, United States Marine Corps," his voice both crisp and respectful. General Hayes stood with arms folded, his expression resolute. "Your Honor, I request permission to address the court regarding the defendant, Sergeant Samuel Tucker." Judge Carter, clearly impressed, nodded assent. Applause rippled softly as the general approached the lectern. General Hayes turned to Sam, as though seeking an old friend. "Sergeant Tucker, do you recall Beirut in October 1984? He asked in a deep, compelling tone that reverberated through every listener's mind. A hush fell. Even Sam's breath and heartbeat seemed amplified in his chest. Sam looked up, his eyes clouded with longing, then brightened as the memory surfaced. Nights of smoke and shellfire, and the desert chill of Iran. "The Marine barracks," he murmured, his voice low but unwavering. "The bombing." His words echoed, awakening a long-buried recollection. General Hayes nodded and stepped forward, addressing the courtroom. "In 1984, I was a 10-year-old boy, the son of a Navy nurse stationed alongside our unit. During a sudden missile attack, I was trapped under the rubble of a collapsed building. I likely would have perished if not for the courage of an EOD sergeant who risked his life to reach me. He, Sergeant Samuel Tucker, crawled through shrapnel and broken glass to shield me beneath his heavy armor." The general's voice trembled slightly as he continued. "Shrapnel tore through his hip, yet he carried me to safety. I remember the warmth beneath that steel plating, amid a world in ruins. He sacrificed himself to save a child." The courtroom fell into a breathless silence. The rustle of papers and the click of cameras sounded unnaturally loud. All eyes fixed on Sam, the ragged homeless man in orange. Yet now the glint of those medals brought a radiant halo to his lined face. General Hayes strode to the clerk's desk and laid down a thick dossier. "These are Sergeant Tucker's complete service records," he announced in a steely voice. 3 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star recommendation that was never approved, and medical reports documenting his mine injury. Each entry testifies to his courage and selfless sacrifice. He spread the pages before the court lights, the medals and citations starkly legible. The prosecutor, typically proud and sharp, faltered as she rose to rebut. "Your Honor, while we respect Sergeant Tucker's service, the charges of trespassing and theft of government property remain. Federal law makes no exception for past heroism." She paused, silenced by the general's steely gaze sweeping the courtroom. General Hayes pressed on. That military depot ceased operations in 2015. It is no longer maintained, and its contents no longer belong to the federal government. Sergeant Tucker's act, removing one sleeping bag to save his life, was not theft, but a veteran's instinct for survival in lethal cold. I contend that this does not constitute a crime. His words thundered like a battlefield drum, each syllable weighted with justice and gratitude. Outside the courthouse, the first winter snowflakes drifted down, lightly covering the cold stone steps. Sam Tucker descended each one, his orange prison jumpsuit's shackles removed, replaced by the navy blue coat General Hayes had fitted onto him. The coat still carried the warmth of respect and gratitude, so different from the ragged scraps he once wore. Each of Sam's footsteps pressed into the thin blanket of snow, marking his journey from the obscurity of anonymity into the light of justice and honor. Reporters swarmed around him, cameras and microphones raised high, striving to capture the image of this elderly man, his lined face etched with hardship, yet his eyes shining with emotion. "Sergeant Tucker!" they called in unison. This time he was no longer the invisible figure in a tattered jumpsuit. He had become the focal point of a miraculous story, living proof of courage and dedication. Amid the clamoring lenses, Sam did not rush to speak. He simply dipped his head in acknowledgement, eyes drifting to General Hayes, who approached with solemn warmth. General William Hayes stood before Sam, holding an intricately carved wooden box. Silence fell as the general slowly lifted the lid. Inside, nestled upon red velvet lining, lay a brilliant gold, exemplary service medal, edged with a wreath of laurel leaves. Sam closed his eyes. His heart seemed to pause in that instant. The medal was more than metal. It embodied countless nights spent defusing bombs, countless near-death moments spent shielding comrades and innocents. With measured care, the general removed the medal and stepped toward Sam. Before the cameras and rows of reporters, he pinned the medal to Sam's chest, just above the faded name tag, Tucker, on the orange fabric. As metal met cloth, Sam's face glowed with a single tear. He trembled slightly, feeling both the weight of the medal and the weight of a soldier's long overdue recognition. No words were needed, only the rapid clicking of cameras and the awed hush of the witnesses sealed that historic moment. Once the medal was affixed, General Hayes spoke, his voice resonant across this impromptu outdoor stage. "Today we do more than bestow a medal. We restore the honor of silent soldiers like Sergeant Tucker, men who sacrificed so much without ever seeking praise." He then turned, giving Sam a formal salute, as though greeting a comrade returned after many years. Soldiers, officers, reporters, and onlookers below echoed that salute. No words, only genuine reverence. Sam returned the salute with a slow nod. The tear in his eye sparkled in the weak winter sun, mingling with the snowflakes on his shoulder. His weathered face now bore a simple, profound happiness. At last, he was seen, remembered, and honored for what he truly deserved. A week later, Sam sat in a modest apartment deep within the veterans' housing complex. Walls painted pale yellow, windows kept shut to preserve warmth. Winter sunshine filtered through thin curtains, casting gentle golden rays across his face. On his worn wooden table, simply arranged, rested 3 cherished items: a brand new sleeping bag, a gift from the local veterans organization, a small framed photo of the boy in Beirut smiling innocently, and a letter from General Hayes. Sam sighed softly, reading the straightforward, heartfelt handwriting. "Sergeant Tucker, you showed me what true honor is. Not medals or certificates, but the quiet courage to sacrifice without complaint. Welcome home to those who have and will always cherish your service. Respectfully, General William Hayes." Outside the window, the snow remained pristine, yet Sam no longer felt the cold. He gently touched the medal displayed in its small glass case, inhaling the scent of metal and memory. Each morning he awoke in that warm room, beside his new sleeping bag, fresh with its nylon scent and the photograph of the Beirut boy, a token of the moment his life was forever changed. His neighbors, fellow elderly veterans, understood his story more than anyone. For a soldier who had given nearly 3 decades of his life, small joys, watching snow fall, savoring a dark coffee, walking beneath the late autumn leaves, became sacred. Every step, every breath in the crisp winter air reminded him that he had emerged from darkness, reclaimed justice, and rediscovered humanity. People called him a veteran, a silent hero. But for Sam, the greatest gift was simply to be remembered. If Sergeant Sam Tucker's story reaches even one more person, every like, every subscribe, every shared comment becomes a heartfelt thanks to silent heroes like him. Those who bravely defended us unseen, never asking for glory. Share his story far and wide across America, so that small but immeasurable sacrifices will echo through time.